Welcome and thank you for joining us. This webinar is brought to you by a team of individuals from Michigan State University Extension, the produce safety technicians from the Michigan Conservation Districts, the Michigan Agritourism Association, and the Michigan Food and Farming Systems. We have a lot to talk about today. Our agenda today for the UPIC presentation is going to start with a short presentation on the general legal environment in Michigan right now. We're going to hear some insights from growers in a grower-to-grower session. We'll have an overview of options for setting up online ordering platforms. We'll talk about visitor health and hygiene for UPIC and on-farm markets. And we'll hear from a southern blueberry UPIC farm who's been through a season already. At the end of our webinar, we're also going to have a question and answer session, and we'll do our best to address all of the questions we received today and those we've received in the mail already. A few housekeeping things about the Q&A. So the chat is disabled for security purposes. We're just going to focus on using the question and answer. If you're on Zoom, you can see that at the bottom in the controls. It's a Q&A box. Just type your question in and someone will either answer it live at the end of the presentation, or they will answer it during the presentation with a written answer. We're going to try and get to all the questions today. If we don't, we will follow up with a question and answer resource for you. We'll probably send that out via email and also put it up on our Michigan State University Agri-Food webpage. If you're joining us via phone today and you don't have access to the Q&A, you can email a question in to gaps@msu.edu. That's GAPS@msu.edu. So I guess we'll get started. I'd like to welcome our first speaker. Natalie Clackle is joining us from the Michigan Agritourism Association, and she's going to kick off the webinar today with a brief discussion on the legal environment for UPICs and on-farm markets right now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Heather. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the regulations in place and how they apply to UPIC operations here in the state of Michigan. These regulations apply under Executive Order 42. However, from an initial reading, we believe that these will continue to be in place under Executive Order 59, which is the executive order the governor just released about an hour ago. UPIC is not currently allowed under either Executive Order 52 or 59, or 42 or 59. We believe, after talking to industry partners, talking to government officials and outside counsel, that because the executive orders only allow for activity that sustain or protect life, UPIC is not allowed. Individuals can go out to purchase groceries, they can purchase food, and under the executive orders, food such as the UPIC product. So if it's strawberries, strawberries are essential, they're necessary to sustain and protect life. Someone can purchase those strawberries. However, the activity of UPIC itself is not considered to be essential, as it does not sustain or protect life. So the activity of UPIC is not allowed. However, the purchase of the UPIC product in an alternate form, so via a pre-picked berry, through a farm market, a farmer's market, or a pre-order kind of situation, that is allowed. We also think it's important to note that the executive orders do allow for outdoor recreation activity, however, which you could argue that UPIC is. However, the executive order is very specific as to what constitutes outdoor recreational activity. So at this time, UPIC would not be allowed under the exemptions for outdoor recreational activity either. In conversations with government leaders, with our industry partners, we are optimistic and hopeful that UPIC will be allowed in the state of Michigan under some modifications and restrictions at some point during the season. However, we say that with a big caveat that it will depend on the trajectory of COVID-19 and what happens across the state in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So we encourage our UPIC members and operations throughout the state to be optimistic, but also realistic, and make plans to operate their business both as a UPIC and possibly looking at some other modifications to their business if UPIC continues to not be allowed. We are grateful for MSU for organizing this webinar, and if you have any questions about the restrictions and the executive orders and what they mean for your UPIC, we encourage you to check out the Michigan Farm Fund website, where we have some resources for everyone. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. Our next presenters are joining us from their farms today for a grower-to-grower discussion about some of the ways that they are modifying their UPIC farm models to serve their customers during this interesting growing season. Joining us today are Carrie Middleton from Middleton Berry Farm and Christy Hoon from Hoon Strawberry Farm. Carrie, you're up first.
My name is Carrie Middleton, and my sister and I own the farm together with my mother. And we have never done anything but UPIC. The farm has always been a UPIC farm, and we have never really done any pre-picked or online sales or anything along those lines. So going forth, we hopefully will be able to have a UPIC season. We are, of course, are thinking about modifying that and maybe offering some pre-pick options. But I don't know how logistically that might be possible for us. We'll have to figure that out. Some of the considerations that we had were mostly just about safety. How do we get our customers out and keep them safe? And in the past, we've just opened for our UPIC times, and we picked until basically we're picked out for the day. And people were allowed to come and go freely. Now we are considering using an online app called Sign Up Genius to schedule appointment times. And I understand it's free, but there are packages you can buy to make it a little bit more sophisticated. And this would allow us to schedule people in blocks and stagger them. And because we assign picking rows on our farm, we could figure out exactly how many spots we could have open and stagger people throughout the field to be safely socially distanced. And then we would do this throughout the day, as much as we had to pick. Some other considerations going into that would be that people might sign up and you have loss of income because of no-shows, so we considered even doing like a non-refundable deposit, and those deposits would be taken off the price of their strawberries. But those were really, that's really where we are with that, in terms of, we think maybe scheduling people instead of just opening our gates and putting a sign down by our driveway saying that people could go to Sign Up Genius and schedule an appointment for picking. In the past, we have allowed people to bring containers from home, which we would weigh at our welcome desk. And this year we won't be doing that. We will ask that people use new boxes when they come onto the farm, which we will provide. Some other considerations, well, we have porta potties that we rent for our season, and I'm really very hesitant to do that this season. I don't know what the restrictions legally are if we have to offer a bathroom facility for customers, but considering porta potties don't seem like the best place to be during a pandemic. I'm concerned about contamination issues. And in terms of contamination issues, we've also talked about setting up Purell stations. Now, we have offered hand wipes and things like that in the past around the farm for people that want to clean their hands, but we will make sure everyone sanitizes their hands before entering the patch. And there will also be Purell provided at our checkout shed while people have to handle pens and things like that. No eating of anything in the patch. In the past, people had eaten, of course, berries in the patch. They've taken snacks out to the patch, beverages like water bottles and whatnot. Due to your hands touching your mouth, we thought, it's probably just a good idea to eliminate any eating of anything in the patch. Let's see, in the past, people have been welcome to use our picnic tables, swing set, linger on the premises, walk around. We will be eliminating that as well. It will be an in and out approach. We certainly don't want our customers to feel like we're chasing them off, but we'd like to cut down on that contact. We have considered, and we have done in the past, pre-pick orders for elderly especially. So we might actually, expand that and tell some of our elderly customers that we will go ahead and do picking for them this season. The big question for us is children. We have a lot of families that visit our farm, and we do have a family patch that is separate from our assigned picking rows, but we really don't know at this point if allowing any children would be a good idea, or maybe children under a certain age would not be allowed to pick this year. But we are expecting backlash from that decision if we do implement that. So that we will have to talk about further, and we would appreciate, other farmers' input and what they think they're going to do about their picking season with families. Now, some of this information I did obtain from newsobserver.com. My sister and I have certainly been talking about this and brainstorming different ideas on how to keep ourselves and our customers safe for U-Pick season. But newsobserver.com had an article called How NC Strawberry Farms Are Making U-Pick and Pre-Picked Options Safe Amid Coronavirus. That is about all I have.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. A lot of good ideas and information, and thank you for that source as well. Christy, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carrie. You brought up some things that I hadn't thought about, so I appreciated hearing some of the things you brought up. I'm Christy Hoon. We are in the Grand Ledge, Lansing area. We have 5 acres of strawberries. Most of our sales are for U-Pick. About quarter to a third are already picked berries. So we are set up for having pre-picked berries, but we probably will have to hire additional help in order to kind of make up the difference if we're not allowed to U-Pick. Some of the things that we were considering, assuming that we'll be allowed to have a U-Pick season, is customer spacing, customer checkout, how you can get people in and out efficiently so they're not standing around and don't have to stand close to each other. You don't have to space them out a great distance. And then the containers, the container issue. We generally have boxes for people to put their product in. A few people bring their own, but I've heard both sides. So one grower said they only want people bringing their own containers, and other one said they won't allow any containers. So I guess everybody has a different idea on that. Customer spacing, my thought on our operation might be to flag every other row. With 5 acres, we have a lot of space. I don't think social distancing will be a problem, but we will maybe only open up every other row to maximize that spacing. In the past, we had provided buckets for kids to use, mostly just for the kids to pick in their own container and then add to their parents' product. This year we have buckets, but they'll have to purchase for a very small amount. They'll have to purchase it and take it home with them. So that will be good for us because it was always kind of a hassle to wash out those buckets in the past anyhow. So it's a good excuse for us to just continue doing that. We are considering having additional checkout locations. We have some of the mobile card reader options so that we can move around maybe where the customers are and spread that out a little bit. I have to just have more assistance with some of our employees aiding customers and knowing where to go. And so those are some of our thoughts for the U-Pick operation. For having picked berries, I have local kids, middle school and high school kids that help us do our picking. Social distancing will have to be kind of help them do that because kids like to hang out together. So we're going to probably have assigned picking spots for our employees where they need to goes, so kind of spread them out. We'll have to stagger their break time, provide and give them good information on hand washing procedures, and have hand washing stations. In the past, we've just had hand sanitizer, and then just remind them of good sanitary practices and signage for the customers and the employees, and maybe just have some additional assistance to help them out. And one of our other thoughts was on the sorting and packaging of the berries. We need to make sure that the areas where we're doing the sorting can be cleaned and disinfected. When we fold the boxes for the customers, people that deal with the customers have masks and gloves available for the people that are working in the sales building and dealing with the customers. And we probably could also have a drive-up pickup place. This is out on our farm, and so right next to where our house is, right next to our location. So we have like a circle driveway, so it would be very easy for us to have someone just drive up, and we could go out there and greet them and find what their order is, and just deliver it right to their car if they want to. So those are some of the things that we've kind of thought about. And my other thought is that no matter how much you plan, when you go out there and actually try to implement, you have to be flexible, because some of our best ideas sitting around the table don't actually always work when you go out and try to implement that. So that's all I have.
Those are some great insights, Christy. Thank you, Carrie and Christy, for your time today and all of those good ideas. Up next, Garrett Ziegler and Jay Gerhard are going to join us from Michigan State University Extension, and they will be talking about more ideas for some changes to business models that might be options, and how to set up an online ordering platform as well.
Thanks, Heather. This is Garrett Ziegler. I'm a community food systems educator with MSU Extension, and we'll let Jay introduce herself a little bit further once we get to her portion of the presentation. We're just going to talk briefly through some ideas around, whether or not your U-Pick is able to happen or not. We just heard from those two growers about U-Pick and their plans under the assumption that that will be allowed at some point moving forward here, as it is not allowed right now. But we just wanted to talk through some of the ideas and strategies that you might want to look into to reach other markets, to serve customers in a different way than maybe you traditionally had through your U-Pick or farm market. So next slide, please. So just kind of some general things to think about around your U-Pick and farm market operations. Really, I think setting the mindset of we've traditionally looked at agritourism, farms, U-Picks, farm markets as really a kind of entertainment, selling an experience, being able to come out, pick your own food, bring the family, all those sorts of things. So maybe tabling that mindset for a year and really thinking about it as a way for people to access food. So selling people food, getting people those essential items that they need to sustain life under the government's executive orders. So that's definitely a mindset to kind of start thinking about it in that way. And again, things can and will change quickly. So be prepared for your plans that you're leading up to this day to have to adapt to that, tomorrow, based off of what new information might be coming out. We just saw today the new executive order come out. So there may be things that you were thinking up until an old executive order that maybe now you'll have to adapt in different ways. Things like having customers wear masks when they come into your farm markets and those sorts of things. Think about being able to utilize additional outdoor space if you have a farm market. Maybe it's limited in the amount of space that you have in there, so that can limit the amount of customers that you can have coming in there, and still being able to maintain those social distancing regulations. If you have additional outdoor space where you can set up some pop-up tents, areas where you can have people maybe do some pre-ordering, think about customer flow and traffic flow. So just think strategically about how you can set up your market and set up maybe additional areas on your property to be able to serve more customers in a more spread out way. Also, when you're looking at your farm market, it's really important to try and prepackage items as much as possible. You don't really want customers how traditionally being able to kind of serve themselves. If you have displays set up traditionally in your farm market, might want to think more about prepackaging those items that you're going to have, and also maybe looking into things like pre-sales of even CSA style boxes. So if you have multiple products for sale in your farm market, think about creating a box set of those products and being able for somebody to pre-purchase that. All they have to do is come up and pick up something like you see here in this picture with a bag that has their order number and those sorts of things. Makes it really easy. And Jay will talk more about what online systems are available or digital systems are available to help you set up those types of CSA style boxes and do those pre-orders online. Next slide, please. So if something, if these government orders or executive orders extend beyond UPIC season, or it doesn't seem like it's possible for you to host a UPIC season in a way that is safe for yourself, your customers, and your workers, there may be some other options for getting your supply, your product out to customers in different ways than the traditional UPIC. There's a lot of farmers in the area in the state of Michigan that offer CSAs. They don't typically grow large quantities of fruit. So maybe trying to partner with one of those CSA farms to offer your berries as an add-on option for their CSA customers. We've seen a huge jump in CSA sales this year. So that may be a potential outlet, or other farm partners to potentially sell your product through. We understand that labor is going to be an issue. The reason you set up UPIC is one reason because that's the labor supply for getting your berries picked, and when you're not used to hiring workers to fill that UPIC space, that can be difficult. So we also know that there's going to be people that are going to be looking for work this summer, high school, college students that maybe won't have internships that were typically available, or won't have summer jobs at restaurants or other tourism, hospitality related places. So you might want to think about reaching out to those types of workers and labor supply to help you pick that product. If you can't do a UPIC, so that you can still get it picked and get it sold in some other way. Think about other local food outlets, things like food hubs, farmer markets. And if you do just run a UPIC and don't maybe have a farm stand on site, think about setting up a pop-up farm stand where you could still have people come and buy, berries or whatever you're UPICing, in lieu of being able to actually do that UPIC. And then lastly, I'll pass this over to Jay, who's going to talk more about some of the online sales platforms that you might want to utilize and what that would look like.
Cool, thanks Garrett. That was a great lead in. So, hi everyone, my name is Jay Gerhardt. I work down in Washtenaw County, which is the county that has Ann Arbor. I work kind of in the name of economic development, helping local farmers make more transactions in local markets. And what was interesting about this whole crisis is that a lot of the farmers that I worked with watched their markets disappear overnight. Their sales to restaurants, some of their farmers markets closed. And I think you all have a bit of an advantage because you can see it coming, and so you can start planning. But our farmers, they watched their markets disappear overnight, and I was so impressed with how quickly they transitioned online. And so I share that with you because for those of you who might be a little nervous about transitioning online or just don't know what's going on with these online systems, I'm here to break down some of those barriers and also to ensure you that it's not as scary as it seems. We don't have to be this girl in the picture. Next slide. So the first thing to consider is, are you listed on some of these buy local websites? This is a really easy way to get your name out there on places where this kind of information is already collected, and a lot of consumers do use these lists. So in Michigan, if you're a Michigan grower, Taste the Local Difference has statewide platform that customers can search by type of operation. You can Google Taste the Local Difference to get on to learn more. Market Maker is a national platform. So for those of you who aren't Michigan growers, and for those of you who are, that's a great one to check out. And then what we've seen with this crisis is that a lot of our local food policy councils, or maybe if your area has a local food summit, they've been able to mobilize their volunteers to create some of more locally focused online lists. Next slide. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what kind of sales model might you pivot to? We heard from Carrie that she's using Online Genius, and she's like, we are staying with this. We are a UPIC farm. We don't have an extra option. So we're focusing on just continuing and trying to adapt that model. But a farmer like Christy already has a third of her berries pre-picked. And so she might be thinking, how do I expand that part of my business, and in what way do I want to see that manifest on my farm? So community supported agriculture is one option. And as Garrett said, collaborating with an existing one is our recommendation. Do you want to set up a weekly buying club of strawberries or apples or peaches? Do you want to create a virtual farm market? And that might be a very useful tool for some of you who might already have a farm market, just getting it online, getting it virtual. Or do you want to work with other farmers to create a bit of a food hub for customers to get a kind of one-stop shop place? And then lastly, do you want to do delivery with this? You don't have to, but it can be an option. Next slide. So there are a ton of online platforms out there for all of these different options. And this really cool graph was created by the National Young Farmers Coalition. I will share that link with you at the very end of my presentation. But you can see that of all of these platforms, I don't know if you can read it very well, but platforms like Barn to Door, Cropolis, CSA, Where, Farmers Web, Farmigo, Farm for All, there's just tons of them. And these are kind of the major ones. And they all do different functions. Some functions very well for CSAs, some function better for those online virtual farm markets. So this is a great resource to check out. Next slide. The things you should consider. So after you've figured out what kind of sales platform you'd like, and what kind of modifications you're doing to your traditional UPIC system, considering things like, of course, the cost. That's going to be the first thing you're looking at, I'm sure. But also, what is the customer interface? What does it look like? Is it user friendly? Does it feel good to click on things? Does it kind of feel like Amazon? Because a lot of people are used to shopping on Amazon. And thinking about the credit card fees, where are they charged? Also looking at the admin side, is it easy for me to process and update inventory? That's a huge part of these online platforms. It's just updating the inventory every day or every week. It takes quite a bit of time. So is that an easy process? What kind of reports can I pull? Can I offer discounts? If I have meat, can I list a thing by a pound rather than by the each? And then is inventory management built in? Is it going to stop listing that item when I've sold out of the 100 units that I've listed? Or is it going to continue making sales and I have then oversold a product, which I then have to spend more time figuring out on the back end how to reimburse those customers? And for a lot of you, and EBT is expanding a lot right now because of the crisis. So can the system support EBT? Not online EBT, we don't have that, but or at least we don't have that yet, but can I at least use that as an option? Next slide. Here's an example of what one of those might look like. This was an Ipsy market that opened, again, overnight here in our area. And those icons up at the top, local food marketplace, open food network, Barn to Door, those are just examples of some of the ones that I was sharing earlier. Next slide. So a lot of you might be asking what's going on in the background. This was a big question I had. It's like, well, how does this thing work? So we're going to start with the customer. The customer is going onto an online marketplace, just like you would go on to Amazon. And as I listed, there's some specific online marketplaces for food specifically, because they do things like that inventory management or listing things by the pound. But other ones that are not food specific are also perfectly fine to use if that's the best system for you. Can you click next, Heather? I have an animation. So these are things like Squarespace or Shopify, or I heard of a new one this week called Mercado. It's like the market. So that's the platform that the customer goes on to. And then at the very end, after they've shopped and they've built their cart, they're going into a payment gateway. And that gateway is, it's like when you get onto Amazon, it's that page that says, okay, now you're ready to insert your credit card information. These are separate systems from that online platform. And so examples would be Stripe, PayPal, Authorize.net. If you look at Amazon, you can, or any online platform, you'll see like small lettering on like, who owns this payment processing system? So that's where the customer puts in their information. That information goes into a merchant account where it's held before it's verified. That goes into your bank, and then it goes to you. Those merchant accounts are individual to you. However, Square operates slightly differently. Can you hit the next slide, Heather? Or just hit next? So Square is both a payment gateway that puts it into like a general merchant account. So this is what a lot of new businesses already use. It's very user-friendly. You just, you can sign up and be doing transactions the same day. And I'll get in, so Square, so if you're already using Square, or if this is a little confusing, I recommend using Square because it's kind of like training wheels for accepting online payments. All right, next slide. So what if you do use Square? Square is, because it was made in 2009, so it's old, and there's already a suite of e-commerce tools built in. So if you're using Square, it's very easy to set up a Square site, which I think is now called Square Up, but Square also bought Weebly. So there's these kind of pretty robust and beautiful websites that you can build with your Square account, really simple for a customer to use. If you do choose to use one of those online marketplaces like Local Food or Open Food Network or Barn to Door for whatever reason, a lot of those companies can do magic on the back end to get your Square reader talking to that platform. All right, next slide. So for those of you who are interested in setting up a Square account, the University of Kentucky has created a really fantastic, short and sweet how to set up your online store. I highly recommend it. Next slide. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about those online platforms that are specifically for food, the Oregon TILF has created did a nice webinar when this crisis hit that a lot of our farmers joined on to learn more about some of the major ones. Next slide. Additional education. If you are really into this online thing and you want to really ramp it up to the next level, there's a 5-day course offered by Alder Spring Ranch, who does a ton of shipping of grass-fed organic, I don't know if it's organic, but grass-fed beef out of Idaho. This is a really good one. How do I get my farm to rank on Google? As you all know, any person typing in, you pick Ann Arbor, you want your farm, you want your U-Pick farm to come up first. So I highly recommend this checklist for getting your farm up on that Google search for customers up at the top. And then there's an organization called FACT, Food Animal Concerns Trust. I'm not advocating for any of these, by the way. I'm just sharing them with you because they are great webinars to learn more. All right, next slide. And the resources that I used to put this all together was the Cornell Small Farms Program created a Using Online Marketing to Build Resilience webpage. We can send that out later with the notes in the Q&A. And the National Young Farmers Coalition was that really pretty graph that I was showing you, and that's pretty searchable in Google. They have a guide to direct sales software platforms. Also Taste the Local Difference, that Michigan buy local search that I was talking about earlier. They are ramping up, they are boosting up their site to include online stores so customers can search by type of store. They're also offering bulk discounts for some of those online platforms to Michigan farms in their system and technical support. So they can be a great resource in the future. And I think that is all.
Okay, thank you, Jay and Garrett. Lots of really good information, and thank you for those resources as well. We'll be sure to send those resources Jay referenced out at the end of the webinar in a follow-up email. Up next, we have a discussion about visitor health and hygiene for UPIC farms, and joining us today are the produce safety technicians from several of our Michigan conservation districts. We have Michelle Jacobs and Landon Tito. Michelle, I think you're starting.
Yep, thanks, Heather. My name's Michelle Jacobs, and I'm a produce safety technician in Northwest Lower Michigan. And me and Landon are going to talk about this a little with you. I'll let her introduce herself when her slides come up, but we're going to talk about health and hygiene for UPIC farms. And these can be implemented for your farm stands or farm markets also. So you can take some of this information and use it for both. These are suggestions for you, but note that this is for when you're allowed to operate or be able to operate again. And some of those practices might need to be extended, you know, even when the executive order is lifted. So next slide, please, Heather. So some visitor signage. So I have an example of a sign that is from a farm in Southwest Michigan, and this is a sign they made for the produce safety rule for visitors on their farm and what they expect visitors to do while visiting their farm. Signs are an excellent way to communicate your expectations, and it's important information for your visitors. And it's good to make your visitors aware of your policies and procedures to protect them and your produce. Additionally, visitor policies and procedures can be put into place as reasonably necessary and relevant to your farm and to protect public health. And you can talk with your insurance provider to ensure that adequate coverage is in full place for all activities that are occurring on your farm also. So next slide, please, Heather. So you see on the sign that's for the FSMA law, but some things that you might want to consider once things open up, or if you're able to open up into adding onto your signs, it might be something like recommendations for social distancing for groups, like say a family comes, having them distance, staying in designated and assigned UPIC areas. So if you're assigning people to certain areas, just making sure that that's reinforced on a sign. If you want people to wear masks and or gloves for additional protection, that could be up to them, or you could require that on your farm just for additional protection. Maybe if you have the resources to provide that, that's awesome. But if you don't, maybe you can say it's okay to bring your own mask. And make sure to emphasize refraining from eating or sampling produce in the field. And any samples that you provide may be up near the registration desk or as they're leaving to halt those currently. So graphics and other pictures are great for signs, and they can really help get the message across. You can have people make signs for you, and if you don't have the resources to do that, you can make your own signs on farm. There's a lot of things you can do to make signs on farm with the things you already have there. So next slide, please, Heather. So check-in control and visitor policy. So just getting people, filtering them in, so some crowd control options. So check-in control and visitor policy. So using online ordering, like Jay said, that could be an option for your farm market or farm stand, or creating reservation times, which Carrie and Christy both talked about earlier, which are great suggestions. And there are ways you can do this through ticketing services to have people make reservations so that there are a limited amount of people on your farm at one time. Offering curbside pickup, discouraging large groups, and postponing events until the social distancing recommendations are lifted. Verbally communicating customers to customers exhibiting signs of illness that they shouldn't come to the farm, and also saying that you're putting into precautions for your employees as well, so people won't be at risk when they're visiting your farm. And using line markers to show where customers should stand. If you are using an online ticketing system, this might not be as important as if you're having people kind of come up to the stand to check in. And it's always good to use non-porous plastic tables near your check-in or other places that are easily to disinfect. Heather, next slide, please. So this is just an example of a sunflower field U-Pick that's in Mississippi, and they moved to an online ticketing system for their U-Pick operation. And this kind of just details how they did it and their different time slots and how they wish that people operate when they're coming to the farm, and then also a social distancing sign just showing or emphasizing that they would like people to social distance while on their farm. Next slide, please, Heather. So field hand washing and restrooms. So hand washing stations should always be available for visitors. And now it's even more important that people be washing their hands. It's always important, but especially now. Sanitizer is great, but it shouldn't replace hand washing, and you can provide those in addition to the hand washing supplies. There's different ways to get hand washing stations on your farm. You can rent them through different porta-john companies, or you can build your own using materials on the farm, or you can find a lot of good, inexpensive items to build a hand washing station. It's important to frequently service and restock these. Maybe assign someone on your farm who has that duty to regularly check them. And use signage, again, to encourage visitors to frequently wash their hands. Next slide, please, Heather. So there's different options for hand washing stations. Like I mentioned, you can do the rented station option, which is on the right there from Farm in Maine. And you can see they have all the necessary items there. They have the paper towel, the soap, the water. They have the foot pump option, which is the handless water dispersion. And then they have a trash can to throw the disposable paper towel away. You could add hand sanitizer that people could have as well. And then on the left is the University of Minnesota's example of how to build your own. And we can share this resource after on how to build this, but it shows the 5-gallon tank that has the spigot that you can turn on and off. It has a water collection bucket at the bottom, which is important. And then there's soap and your covered trash bin as well. So the covered trash bin is nice because then you don't have all the paper towel blowing around. Global Growers has a great resource and video is how to build your own hand washing station, as well as a pricing list and materials that you may need. So that's a great way to kind of guesstimate, especially if you're wanting to build a couple, how much it'll cost, or if you might even have those supplies at your farm. Next slide, please, Heather. So right now in North Carolina, they have U-Pick operations and going, and they're following the necessary instructions that were given from their state. And a farmer mentioned that he has a employee stationed at hand washing stations to have everyone that's visiting their farm wash their hands before they're even issued a pick bucket. So that's really good to have, or if you don't even have that, you can use signage if you don't have enough employees to be able to encourage that, just to say, can you please wash your hands before we issue you your U-Pick bucket. And some important places to stage these hand washing stations, maybe at the entrance of your U-Pick or your farm stand, at the edge of U-Pick fields, next to restrooms or in restrooms, and that should always be the case, and near areas where money is being handled or transactions are taking place. So that's all from me, and I'm going to pass it over to Landon now. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And hi, everyone. I'm Landon Teetle. I am the produce safety technician located in the Upper Peninsula. I'm located out of Marquette, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. This is a good transition from Michelle's last slides talking about hand washing. We're going to go right into cleaning and sanitizing of pick buckets on your U-Picks. And so there's a 5-step process you see here, 4 to 5-step process that's really important. And hopefully this is just a sort of refresher for you. Hopefully this is not the first time you're seeing this, but first we really want to remove that initial sort of debris or visible dirt from a surface. That could be just sweeping or maybe a initial rinse. And then we really want to use a detergent and physically scrub, really put some elbow grease into that surface to remove any debris. And that's really important to remove all the debris so that the sanitizing step can really do its job. So once you've put your elbow grease into with your detergent, then we want to do a final rinse with clean water. And remember that this is food contact surfaces, and so clean water is really important to make sure you're using, and by clean we mean free of detectable E. coli in the water. So you want to make sure that your water is clean and that it's tested to make sure there's no E. coli present, because we don't want to reinfect our surfaces with dirty water. And then after you've done that, then we can go ahead and apply a sanitizer according to the label instructions. And if that label instruction indicates that it needs a final rinse step, then that's your step 5. Okay, next slide, Heather. So what about the containers that customers will be using? It's really important, especially this year, to provide your customers with a clean picking container at the start. And that could either look like maybe a reusable one-time like cardboard box or something, or it could also look like a reusable plastic container that can be easily cleaned with, remember, clean water, using those steps that we just talked about in the last slide. It's also important, if you are using reusable containers, that they're cleaned on a daily basis and in between customer uses. We really want to make sure that we're not handing a container to a customer that a different customer just had who had left. So we want to pay extra attention to cleaning and sanitizing surfaces that are touched the most frequently, those high touch areas, so like handles or things like that on the surfaces that get touched the most. And then it's a good idea to use a non-absorptive plastic cleaning tool, such as a plastic brush with your soap and detergent rather than a sponge, which easily transfer germs between containers. Next slide, Heather. So if you're wondering what the difference between sanitizing and disinfecting surfaces are, the biggest difference is that disinfectants are considered a higher, stronger class of a viral decontamination chemical than a sanitizer. It's also important to note that most disinfectants are not food grade, and so when we're cleaning and sanitizing food grades or food surfaces, food contact surfaces, that we're using a sanitizer safe for food surfaces. Disinfectants are more for use on things that are not directly touching your fresh produce. So we're thinking things like door handles, bathroom surfaces, scales, cash registers, your point of sale devices, things like that, things that are high touch, that will come in contact with a lot of different people, but are still not direct food contact surfaces. Another thing you might want to put on your disinfection list is if you provide buckets or containers at your U-Pick that are wearable, so they have a tie or a rope belt that someone can like hang around their waist or around their across their chest, to make sure that those wearable materials are sterilized, and that can either be done in a washing machine at home with detergent, or by putting them in the oven at 120 degrees for 30 minutes. And it's important to note that microwaving has not been established as a virus kill step. Heating it in the microwave is not the same as putting it in the oven. And you can see there's a link on this slide for a list of EPA recommended disinfectants. And the last thing I want to note here too is that some of your sort of over-the-counter disinfectant wipes, like Lysol or Clorox brand wipes, are not really good uses for a commercial setting like your UPIC farm. Even if they do have the same ingredient as some of those EPA listed disinfectants, they are often a lower concentration, and they might dry out faster and not be quite as effective. Next slide, Heather. So if you're wondering, when do I need to sanitize? When do I need to disinfect? How often? This is a really good, simple chart. All surfaces should be cleaned every day, just as a general rule. And this is not only, in the time of this pandemic, this is also good for protecting against all foodborne pathogens and foodborne illnesses that may come across your farm. So this is a good idea every day. In terms of sanitizing, we want to sanitize food contact surfaces every day and non-food contact surfaces on a regular schedule that your farm has created that seems appropriate for the use on your farm. And disinfecting, it's important to do at least twice per day for those really high touch surfaces, and more if you can manage it. Next slide, please. So switching gears a little bit to talk about social distancing or in-field distancing in your UPIC operation. This is super important. We still need to social distance at this time, and so you're going to want a policy or some sort of rule in place on your UPIC to manage social distancing. And obviously this is going to be much easier for low growing crops like these strawberries that you see in the picture, and it will be more challenging for UPIC operations that grow taller crops like blueberry bushes or apples. It might be easy for people to get kind of lost in between the plants there, and it might be hard to monitor. Next page, or slide, please. So there are several things we can do to maintain social distancing in the field, and if we want to kind of look at setting up our UPIC fields for intentional social distancing. So setting them up in a way that sets yourself up for success and allows people to stay away from each other and be safe. Some things we want to maybe think about are, how are you going to keep your groups of people small? Are you going to limit them to just individuals or maybe small families who arrive together? Just how are you going to keep those groups small? And then also, how are you going to limit the number of people in your field at any given time? So that starts, of course, with determining what is a responsible amount of number that you can have in your field at any given time. So you need to look at your total space, factor in, the 6 foot distance, radius distance between all of those people, and really determine how many people can I have, or how many groups can I have in my field responsibly at this time. And maybe that looks like you create a schedule, really kind of like at a doctor's office, where you have, if you can responsibly have 10 groups of people in your field at a given time, you'll have 10 time slots for a given hour, and then people can sign up. And once those 10 time slots are full, then they have to just wait or reschedule at a later time. Another thing that you can think about is assigning sections or rows to people to make sure that they just have one designated area to be in, and that is their space, and they cannot go into other areas. And you can see in this picture on the left here, the field is separated up into rows like that. The sections are 2 rows each, and so one group or one individual would be assigned that section, and so they can. And then effectively what that means is that the people can be about every other row in the field. And the picture on the right is set up a little bit differently. Instead of by row, it's set up in blocks. And so the sections are kind of horizontal across the field, but it's the same sort of idea. And then we also want to think about, how are we going to staff the UPIC field so that we're managing people and making sure that they're following the policies and not jumping rows and being too close to each other and things like that. Next slide, please. So when it's time to cash out, There's a lot of things to consider here. If your farm is set up to take credit card payments or online payments, try to encourage that as often as possible or as much as possible, and try to minimize the use of cash. If cash is used, employees handling cash it's a good idea to wear gloves and also wash your hands frequently. And it's also not a bad idea if you have access to a 60% or higher alcohol-based sanitizer to use a sanitizer in between transactions. Another thing that we want to think about is maybe assigning one employee to only handle money and having a second employee handling produce. So if your product needs to be weighed before someone can cash out, have two different people there so that the same person is not handling your fresh produce and also handling money. If that's not possible, some other options may be to provide that checkout person, the employee, with some sort of utensil or tongs or something to touch the produce rather than with their hands, or maybe even using things like deli tissue or things like that. Next slide, please. So this is just a recap. I'm not going to go over it in a lot of detail. Basically the highlights: wash your hands, clean and sanitize and disinfect surfaces as necessary, and keep people away from each other. Next slide, please. So these next several slides, 5 slides, you can kind of go through them, Heather. I'm not going to go over them in detail for the sake of time, but I do want to highlight that they are in here. These are frequently asked questions about sanitizing and disinfecting on your farm. So these slides will be sent to you after in the recording. So please take your time to go back and look at these, and they may answer some of the questions that you have. If you want to just go through them, then that's fine, Heather. And there's also a resource page on here too that we used to create some of our slides at the end of these frequently asked questions. And next slide, Heather. So this is our last slide, and I just wanted to point this out too. This is a map of all of the produce safety technicians in the state. If you have any questions or would like some free and voluntary confidential assistance on your farm, your produce farm, and with anything in regards to produce safety, please give us a shout. We are here and happy to help. And that's all I have. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Landon. So much great info. So thank you, Michelle and Landon, for your time and expertise on that. So one last thing we want to share with you today are a few more thoughts from a fellow grower. We wanted to try and get some insights from someone who's been through a U-pick season already, and we reached out to some Florida growers for that information. Shane Mart from H&A Farms agreed to share with us, but he wasn't able to meet with us live today. He recorded an interview with Phil Toko from Michigan State University Extension earlier this week, and here are some thoughts from Shane.
So I'm here with Shane Mart, who is Director of Compliance at H&A Farms in Mount Dora, Florida, and he's getting the tail end of his blueberry picking season, and they do a lot of U-pick, and so we thought it would be interesting to talk with him a little bit with regards to what he does and what he's done this season different. So I'm curious, every state has really responded differently to this crisis. Those responses have had various impacts on produce growers. I'm curious, how did Florida respond, and was there any particular impact on your operation?
Phil, I think there was a big impact. Working in the packing house, as well as having my own U-pick and dealing with some of our other growers that have U-picks as well, I've kind of seen multiple viewpoints from where, from our industry, the blueberry industry. Mm-hmm. And so the food service market is essentially dried up with the closings of schools, restaurants, cruise ships, and everything. And our blueberry season really coincides with, spring break. So a lot of people are traveling to Florida and, to our areas to do U-picks, and kind of that's just something, families enjoy doing. So I feel like that's, really, kind of impacted sales, and just, not having these big social gatherings. And that's something really that, I think that people want to come out in groups, families, and everything to come out to our, our U-Picks and pick blueberries and other produce as well. So it's been a huge impact, I feel like, on our operations, and it's really, we've kind of had to get creative as to what we were doing to really try to bring people still to the U-Picks through a variety of different ways. And we can kind of expand on that.
So everyone seems to have a little level of anxiety about our current situation. From from a business perspective, did anything keep you up at night about the crisis beyond just the general personal stuff?
Being the food safety director for H&A, employee safety is definitely a huge concern when it comes to delivering everybody with a safe, wholesome product. So employee health, I mean, that's been the big one. That's worried the heck out of me. You see some of these headlines that we've seen recently with Smithfield, with some of their pork facilities and everything having to shut down because of the virus. And so that's really kind of hit home close to us, because we do have a lot of people that do work in the packing house, and so we kind of do our best to really to social distance everybody. We've had extended trainings to reiterate the importance of GMPs and other good hygiene practices. But in some situations in the packing house especially, it's really hard to maintain that 6 foot distance. So we've had to kind of get creative in that regard too. We take temperatures. We've got the thermal scanners and everything. So before they come into work, we make sure that they don't have a fever. So that's and anyone that has a fever, has any symptoms of sickness, they're not allowed to work. Come in the packing house to work. So I think that's kind of been a preventative measure, a step that we've taken. And then we've got hand sanitizer and soap and hand wash stations about everywhere you can imagine. So we definitely can't hit home enough with that, washing your hands and good hygiene. We've added additional people to our staff, where all they're doing is going around and cleaning door handles, around the sink areas, anywhere that there might be where that virus may, live momentarily until it gets on another person. So we really, just kind of try to step up our sanitation and to try to prevent this as best we can.
So everyone, it sounds like you guys really did a pretty comprehensive program with regards to taking care of the sort of the employee base. I'm curious about, there's some folks that are walking around probably with some anxiety that might be your customers. So I was kind of curious if there were any differences in how you advertise to your prospective clientele to address any anxiety they might have about coming out and doing U-Pick.
Surprisingly, it's kind of been, there has been a lot of anxiety, but it's also been quite the opposite too in some regard. At least for Floridians anyways. I can't speak for Michiganders or anything, and I know we're not used to being cooped up for long periods of time. A lot of the families really around here, it seems like they kind of have cabin fever, and they want to venture out and do any outdoor activities that they're allowed to do. And so what we've done, and I think what a lot of our growers have done, and what I've done as well with my U-Pick, we've kind of just done a great job keeping the customers up to date with some of the practices that we're doing to keep them safe. So we've done anything. We've got some of the U-Picks that are doing like a curbside pickup, where you kind of call ahead, or on their website sign up for the what products and stuff you're looking for and everything. And you can a lot of them are even doing prepay online, so you don't even have to exchange any kind of money. And I think that's really put some of those customers at ease. So they they're not even getting out of their vehicle. They're rolling the window down. It's a person coming up to them that just washed and sanitized their hands, handing them their product, and they can be along their way, and they feel good supporting local agriculture. And then I've got other ones that right down the road from me, a friend of mine, they've got a U-Pick Peaches, and they've done they've got a sign up. I believe it was Sign Up Genius. It's a free program you can get online. And they use that, and they have different time slots that you can sign up for, and they won't let more than 10 people into that field or that block. And so they've done everything they can kind of to social distance, individuals. So, families can still kind of go out and do that outdoor activity and still stay safe and abide by, the guidelines set forth.
Well, it sounds like you mentioned that Floridians don't like to be cooped up. So I'm curious if there were any differences in maybe the number or the demographics of the customers that showed up this year as opposed to maybe previous years in the past.
That's a tough one because I've honestly I've seen both ends of the spectrum. So you see a lot of families with young children and everything that they want to get them out of the house, want to get them running around outside doing something. And then you also see some of the older couples where older couples want to get out, and I think their thing is they really want to support American local agriculture, and so that's been a big one. So you'll see various a lot of face masks and doing our part and everything to keep those people that are most at risk safe. So it's honestly it's been refreshing, I guess, to see the pride in which these customers have for taking part and really wanting to get out there and purchase local American produce.
Sweet. Well, so I heard you talk a little bit about this, but I'm wondering, apart from just signage, were there other ways that you communicated the changes to customers that you made or the employees on the farm? How did you reinforce? Because it sounded like you did a lot of things to help make sure that your employees stayed healthy and tried to make sure that there wasn't a lot of spread among your customer base. Were there any special ways this year different than previous years in terms of talking about food safety or talking about just general health and hygiene of workers?
Well, a lot, like I said before, a lot of the growers, they have closed the U-pick portion of the business, and they've been doing, scheduled pickup hours, which is something normally they wouldn't be doing, after hours, where the people that, that are on the front lines or, the different people that still have to work, the essential employees, just doing after hour kind of pickup. The pre-pick produce has, been a big thing or new thing, I guess, because a lot of times essentially they really want, the reason they're coming out to this U-pick is they want to pick their own produce, but they understand that it could be a little bit more dangerous at this time, so they've been more accepting of of buying the the pre-pick stuff that's coming from the farm, and like having scheduled appointments. And besides, Facebook market or Facebook itself has been, kind of, it's a blessing and a curse. It definitely helps get the word out. And, I'm able to, talk to all my customers that want to come out and say, hey, if you're coming out, this is what I need you to do for me. And, if you're sick, don't, we find someone else that, can go get the produce for you, and just reiterate the importance of, washing your hands. I've got plenty of hand wash stations. We've got plenty of hand sanitizer when you come out. So really just informing the public ahead of time to what to expect when you come to, to the U-pick. So, Facebook, Instagram, if, some of the other growers that we have, they have their own website where they're able to post some of those instructions. And then I've, gone as far as, poster board and making, handmade signs as well when they get to, the facility. So I think it really depends on how the operation is set up. And how comfortable that, you feel that you'll be able to follow the rules and, to spread that, to limit the spread of that, that virus. So, all the growers, myself, everyone at H&A and Atwood Family Farms, and Southern Hill are ones around our area that we work with, and they've done an excellent job, really doing everything we can to inform the public and preventing, any, the spread of this virus. So I've seen other ones eliminate cash transactions. So everything is done, PayPal or Venmo or just some of those online cash transactions, and so you don't have the exchanging of money or anything like that where it could possibly contaminate that person or So that's been the biggest the biggest challenges and different changes to the U-picks.
Sweet. One last question. I'm curious, if you could change one thing about this season, what would it be in terms of the way things went and the practices that you put in place? What one thing would you change having to go through it again?
I think preparedness has been the biggest thing, because really this has really changed the dynamic of UPICs, and a lot of us we're not, you know, prepared for something like this, and having to change on the fly. I think everyone has done an excellent job doing that, but it's really been a challenge. So I think just kind of adapting that situation and really preparing ourselves for the future. If something like this were to happen, you know, knock on wood, hopefully, you know, we don't have to deal with something like this in the future. But I think, you know, larger stock of supplies. I mean, I kind of scrambled, you know, trying to find sanitizer was, you know, difficult to find. So I wish I had a little bit more. And paper towels, you know, paper goods are still, I don't know how it is up there, but it's definitely difficult to try to get your hands on paper towels. And so
Yeah.
I wish we had a little bit better stock of those kind of things. We were able to find it and provide those, you know, the employees and provide anyone that comes out to our farms, you know, with hand sanitizer. But it's definitely been a struggle to try to find some of those goods. So I think in the future I'll definitely have a larger supply of that, so I don't have to, you know, scramble around finding it.
I think we all have learned the value of having an extra roll of toilet paper squirreled away somewhere, or the same thing with paper towels.
Mm-hmm.
Shane, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I think you bring a really good perspective, because we're maybe a month or 2 months away from our blueberry season, actually a month and a half away from strawberry season, and then blueberry season to follow. So,
Okay.
you know, we're still trying to learn and negotiate this stuff. And I really appreciate your perspective, because I think it'll bring a lot to the UPIC folks up this way.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Okay, thank you all for your time and expertise today. This concludes our webinar presentation. We will move on to the question and answer session now. For those of you who couldn't join us, a copy of the question and answer will be sent via email once the webinar is posted. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Stay safe.